All right, so looks like we're live.
Alrighty, welcome everyone to the 2014 Miss JD Google Hangout. It's our first Google Hangout featuring the 2013 Miss JD Fellows, and will be moderated by myself, Rachelle Tasher, and Laura Blatta, one of our programs managers. I just want to begin by introducing myself. My name is Rachelle Tasher. I'm a board member on the Miss JD Board of Directors, as well as the fellowship coordinator for this year. And we're here pretty much to talk about the Fellows Project. With the Miss JD Fellowship, the Fellows are paired with mentors from ABA leaders, from the Women on Commission in the Profession and other organizations and entities within the ABA. The Fellows this year actually coordinated a project titled Acing Law School, and we're going to discuss that tonight. So Laura, you can tell us a little bit more about the guide.
All right, so Acing Law School takes you all the way through the application process, through the job search process, and how to get the most out of your law school experience. It's published online as an ebook. You can find the link at msjd.org. And no matter if you're just starting to look at law school or if you're a current law student, it has plenty of advice for you. So this evening we're going to sit down with some of our fellows to dive a little bit deeper into the issues they present in the ebook.
Okay, awesome. So first up we have Irene and Brenda. This is a really important topic, and it's also personal to me because I'm a first-generation law student, and navigating the waters in law school, not having any family members that have experienced law school was very, very difficult for me. So Brenda and Irene, if you guys can tell us a little bit more about how incoming law schools can deal with that.
Sure, I can lead us off. So, yes, it is a very important topic. I'm a first-generation law student myself, and I think if I could give advice to someone either in that situation now or even thinking about law school, I'd really stress that as you're going through this process to ask for help very early on and continue to ask for help. But most of all, offer that you are a first-generation law student. People make assumptions. We all do. And really, a lot of people went out of their way once they found out that I was a first-generation law student to help me in everything from how to budget to apply to the, how to budget to pay for the LSAT, an LSAT course, to how to figure out which classes to take when. These are all really important topics that aren't necessarily available in your, guides that your law school provides. And I think one of the very first chapters in the guide, we broke down several topics, and this includes a lot of the information that we're presenting today. But I really stress that you don't forget, there's a lot of people out there that are basically went through this as a first-generation law student as well, and including myself and several others, that you're not doing this by yourself. You're not the first one. There's a lot of people in your shoes.
That's some really, really good advice. I know for me, like you just said, tapping into mentors and knowing that you're not alone. I remember sitting in my law school class and thinking to myself, everyone's aunt's a lawyer, or their cousins or their fathers have generations of law firms. And I'm like, where do I fit in this big picture? What would you tell a law student or someone coming in with that fear, that anxiety of thinking, I don't fit in this, where do I fit in this big puzzle? How would you possibly give them some reassurance that they're here for a reason?
I can take that, or Irene.
Irene, are you on?
I am. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in.
Okay.
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is just that I had that same fear. I thought that certainly I knew very little about what law school was going to be like, and I didn't have a lot of people to ask questions about. One thing, though, that became clear pretty quickly was that we were all in the same boat, regardless of if your father or brother or uncle, maybe they had a better sense of what it was going to be like, but everybody had to put in the same amount of work. And for me, I think that putting in the work and the time sort of helped to even the playing field a little bit. Maybe first generation students, I still felt like I had way more unanswered questions than others, but I think once it gets down to like putting in the time in the library, everybody pretty quickly becomes equals. At least that was the case in my experience, and I'd be happy to hear if that's true for Brenda or others.
I think for me, being a first generation law student, and also, I mean, basically first generation high school graduate, college graduate, so I've been a lot of firsts in my family. Uh, I think that it gave me a lot of context for a lot of the problems that we would read in cases. And it also really forced me to seek out mentors very early on. And because I was a first generation student, they stuck with me since the very beginning. And while maybe my dinner table chat wasn't about, my father's or my mother's court case at the that month, it kind of when I would talk to my family, it helped me, I guess, translate and reflect what I've been learning from week to week. So it kind of helped me in my learning process, because I would have to explain to my mom and dad, this is what a tort is, and reflect back, or this is what an issue in copyright would be, or whatnot.
Right, absolutely.
So it gives you context that everybody comes with a very unique background to law school, regardless of where you fall into this. But being a first generation, you're almost very fresh to the law, and it gives you a very unique perspective.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, kind of along the same lines from what Brenda said, with everyone coming to law school with a unique background, a unique perspective, Rebecca and one of our other fellows who's not with us today, Rima, wrote a chapter about being a straight out of undergrad law student. And so, Rebecca, you all mentioned in your chapter that the decision to go to law school straight away wasn't an easy one. Why did you decide to go straight from undergrad? And what do you think was the biggest obstacle you overcame as a straight out of undergrad law student?
Yeah, absolutely. So going to law school for me was never something I didn't think I want to do. So there's obviously lots of advice people will give you to take a year off or do something else for a while. But for me, it's what I knew I wanted to do, and so I didn't see the point in delaying the 3 years and delaying getting into the field. The hardest part is the adjustment that you have to make from undergrad. Obviously, if you take a few years off, you get to go into the workforce and you get to work your 40-hour weeks, and you understand what that means. And when you're an undergrad, it's obviously a very different lifestyle that sometimes includes naps and often includes going out on Thursdays and things like that. And to really be successful in law school, I think you need to treat it like a job. You need to treat it like something that you're taking seriously as in your career. And so when you're straight out of undergrad, that's sometimes more of a difficult transition. And so I think for those students, while I fully support their decision because it's the one I made and it's worked out great for me, I think that that's something just to be aware of, that, you do need to start thinking about school as a career choice as opposed to, an education.
And Rebecca, I had a quick follow-up for that as well. I know a lot of times I know I personally took a year off between undergrad and law school, but a lot of my friends that went straight through talked about that burnout that they feel, not taking any time out. Did you experience that, or how did you deal with the continuous school that some people are just like, oh, I don't know if I can take on another exam, another test?
Yeah, I don't think for me that was so much an issue in my first year. That really became an issue when you come into, the second semester of your second year, and especially when you're in your third year. I mean, that's the 7th year of straight college, essentially, a straight higher education. So that's, I think, when the burnout maybe starts, but I don't think anyone in law school gets to their third year and is still very gung-ho about going to class. But I think I would say that, um, again, my advice would be to focus on law school as part of your career, as a career decision. Treat it more as a job than you do as an education. And it's obviously going to be very different than your undergraduate experience. By the time you're a third year, you'll probably have internships and externships and clerkships and other things going on. So that makes it easier to kind of not get burned out towards the end.
Definitely. And that's a good segue into making relationships last in law school. A lot of the times you leave undergrad, you have your friends, you might have a boyfriend, and they're like, oh, you're going away to law school. How do you deal? How do you keep up with those relationships? I know for me, it was so hard to actually get on the phone and call my family, call my friends. And Brenda, if you could kind of touch on that a little bit, how you dealt with maintaining those relationships as well as creating new ones in law school.
So, when I started the law school process, I was already married, and so I had to basically sit down with my husband and explain what the little that I did understand of what was to come, and say, I'm going to be a day student. I'm going to have basically set the expectations of what my schedule was going to be like. As far as family goes, I made it a habit to have almost like a standing appointment to have a call on Sunday afternoons with both of my parents and just text back and forth, find ways to communicate with my siblings. And so that way I didn't completely fall off the grid, but they did see that I was alive. And I just couldn't come out for different things like before. And I guess now in school, I made sure to form relationships with very different groups, all from professors to staff, because they were helpful in many ways, but also with students. And I quickly found that while I'm being in my 30s, I didn't have the energy to go out and socialize with younger 20-year-olds, but I would see them, and I made sure to form study groups very quickly, which are very helpful, and then also just join very different organizations around my school, just things that I was interested in. As you will find out, for those of you who haven't started, first year you get approached by many different associations, groups, because they want your help. They want your input to put on programs and so forth. Now, this is a really great way to form new relationships with people that you may not even be in your section or in your year. And so, really, the relationships that I formed were either through study groups or through groups, student groups that I joined. And these were really helpful in that I met people who were maybe a year or 2 years ahead of me, which was great because I would always ask them about, what professors to take or which classes to take or when to take classes and things like that were just extremely helpful. But I think it really does take you to put yourself out there, and because it's very easy to just sit in your home office, sit in the library, and just seclude yourself from everything because you feel like you're so busy. But you can't do this experience without forming relationships because it's that hard. You do need some support.
Absolutely.
All right, so this next question is going to be for Anisha, who wrote a chapter in the book about women of color in law school. So Anisha, what role did diversity play for you when it came to choosing which law schools to apply to?
So, it was very important to me. I think early on in the application process, I think after you take the LSAT, you start getting sort of solicitations from a lot of different law schools that, highlight various aspects of the curriculum, extracurriculars, the student body, and I think, I don't know what I checked on what box, but I started getting a lot of information about the various sort of diversity statistics, at various schools. And I think there were several universities. I chose Berkeley, and Berkeley was one of a few different law schools that had given me information sort of about the various identity groups on campus, including things like the Berkeley has a Women of Color Collective, there's now the Men of Color Collective. I went and visited, and I think numbers don't necessarily tell you as much about what a campus will feel like, what sort of how inclusive it really is, and what sort of resources there are for for students of color who often experience, I think, similar to first-generation law students, there's a lot of overlap there, right, as we all know, but experience very high levels of alienation and sort of isolation in the law school classroom. So it was going and visiting and sort of seeing the the dynamic that existed on the campus, where things like racial justice and social justice were talked about and were not sort of foreign concepts. I think for a lot of people that was very important for me. I think both as a woman of color, I wanted a space where I felt safe and comfortable to sort of talk about my identity and also feel as though my identity was appreciated or sort of acknowledged in, I think, a space, right, a field where traditionally, folks of color, especially women of color, have not always had access to these, right? So that was very important for me, and it was important to feel as though I wasn't going to be a token voice in a classroom, and so for all of those reasons, I think I ended up choosing a place where I felt as though there would be a community of kind of like-minded folks, and also enough folks of color that I didn't feel like I would be sort of a lone voice or kind of a lone person in that space.
Awesome. And Anisha, I had a quick follow-up question. How would you say that you were received by other women of color? Were you able to share the same views with them? Were you able to connect with them and also kind of create like a semi-bond just based on that fact, so you all could progress and feel more comfortable in your law school situation?
I mean, I think obviously everyone is going to have a different experience. It's like law school, sort of the real world, except still a microcosm of it, and maybe with a higher concentration of a particular personality type. But but I think for me, it became very clear very early on that there were, it's certainly like, I would never purport to say, right, that like all women of color, all folks of color have the same views on anything. But I think it became very clear to me, from class experiences, right, like class conversations where there are certain topics that are very much intellectual exercises for some people, right? Like you'll read a case, I think criminal law kind of to be where a lot of this happens to pop up, or sometimes constitutional law, where things feel very much like an intellectual exercise, that people are playing around with ideas, and it doesn't feel real, right? Whereas I think that often you'll come across cases where, I think for a lot of women of color, it's our communities, right? It's our lives that are being talked about. It's our sort of rights that are that feel much, these things feel much more real and much more personal. And I think that in classes, it became obvious from discussions and from people who would kind of have your back from across the room when you said something, and it seemed like it fell, on deaf ears, or there were like crickets chirping when you said a comment, and then you'd have someone across the room be like, no, actually, I thought that was a really important point, and I've also, I agree, or I've experienced it this way. And so I think I certainly did, and I think it was really helpful that I found an institution where there was sort of structural support to find that community, right? Like where we had identity organizations that not only kind of sought out folks, I'm South Asian, so, I was part of the South Asian Law Students Association, but we also had a lot of opportunities to create solidarity, right? Organizations would communicate with other identity organizations and really work towards sort of, I think, cross-racial solidarity and, cross-identity solidarity, and try and look for opportunities to plan events or address issues that arose on campus, right, in a way that was mutually supportive. And I think that was really, for me, that was very important to feel like I was part of an institution and in a space where there was, where people created room for that. And I certainly don't mean to, like, Berkeley's not an ideal place, by any means. No law school, I think, is, but I found people, and I had opportunities to find people who I think were very, very supportive and wonderful.
And that's awesome to hear. Definitely awesome to hear. And we're definitely going to jump in with Selena as well as Irene to talk about how you can take those bonds that you've created and use those things to land summer internship opportunities and making the most of getting that initial offer and using those experiences to kind of catapult your legal career as a law student. So Irene and Selena, you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you for having us. And Irene, if it's okay, I'll just jump in and talk about before the offer, and then you can talk about your experience getting the offer from your internship. I think Irene and I had very different experiences with our job search, and it lended for a really interesting and dynamic co-authorization of the chapter. So I guess I'll start by saying the way that I found was the best way to get internships was by going to networking events and meeting people, because eventually the women in particular that I met were very interested in lending a helping hand and telling me about internship leads. One young woman in particular, her name is Natasha Banan, she was clerking at a judge's chamber. She graduated from my law school. I met her at an event before I went to law school, and we stayed in touch. And when I was a 1L student, she said, hey, why don't you apply to intern with Judge Ronald Ellis in the Southern District in New York? I, being a law student, 1L law student, didn't have much confidence, but because of her encouragement and knowing that the only loss I would have is by not applying. So I just jumped in, sent in my application, and it worked out. I was able to intern with this judge my first summer, and thereafter that set the tone for my other internships that I was able to get because of this platform that she was able to give to me as a gift. And I went with it. I worked really hard that summer, and then thereafter I got another internship with the Eastern District the following summer. No offers came of those internships, but I was really excited about the contacts that I had made. And after being accepted to the Miss JD Fellowship, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to bring in the contacts that I made at the internships and bring them back to my school for an event, which I had as part of my Miss JD event. And it was facilitated by my Miss JD mentor, Judge Denny Chin. And to this day, he's been an incredible contact and support for me. He was not very involved in my job search, but he was always very supportive of all my projects, my events at school, or the program that I started with him called it's named after the justice and her mother, the Sonia and Selena Sotomayor High School Judicial Internship Program. And there's going to be 18 students, high school students, from underrepresented backgrounds in the law, interning with 17 judges in New York. And that was all because of the Miss JD Fellowship starting this spark and making this connection. And then as a Miss JD Fellow, you have to take that opportunity and run with it. So
That's awesome. And also, Selena, how can students in your area get more information about that in the future? I know you guys just got started, but if you have like a website or an email address that you can definitely pass on.
Sure, sure. So our website, it's really simple. It's just hsjip.org. It stands for High School Judicial Internship Program.org. Justice Sotomayor will be meeting all the students this summer in the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. And I hope to make this program even more robust and continue being involved with the Miss JD Fellowship, the alumni, and also the interns that come into the program, get them involved so that we can set up more judicial internship programs like this for students, law students, and high school students around the country. I'd love to expand this program. And I know that because of the contacts that I made in my internships, and then Miss JD being a catalyst to bring all these contacts together, to have a purpose for these contacts, I feel like that's been one of the most valuable experiences from my internship, internships throughout law school. The job, which I got very late, I got a week before graduation. I'll be clerking in New Jersey, and that had nothing to do with the work that I was doing with Judge Chin and the other contacts for this judicial internship program. It was just kind of luck, and it worked out. But I know that Irene has some really great tips specific to how to take an internship opportunity and make it into a job. My experience is very different, but I love that she has another complementary experience to share.
Thanks, Selena. Rachel, do we just have a minute or two and I can sort of briefly answer the question as well?
Yeah, go for it, Irene.
Okay. So my experience, as Selena mentioned, was a little different in that, and we wrote about this in the chapter, my first summer I also clerked for a judge, and I just did my best to, while I was there, really get to know the staff, get to know his law clerks, learn a lot about what it even meant to be a law clerk. I think your 1L summer, you sort of don't quite yet understand what all of the potential jobs out there are. Maybe that goes back to sort of being a first-generation law student, but I didn't even really know what clerking meant. So I made relationships and held on to them and sent sort of the nice thank you cards and a holiday card and just sort of made sure that they remembered who I was. And I think, if nothing else, my best advice is just to take time to get to know the people around you. They'll want to get to know you, but they're going to be busy. So if you can make time to ask questions about their experience and their journey, I think most people in the legal field are willing to share that information and are happy to answer questions. If you make time and ask them to do it specifically, I would send emails with dates asking for lunch times to go out with the law clerk so that I could get that information, and it really worked. And just really being diligent, being the person in the office who's always on time and always leaves when they're supposed to or later, and getting their work done on time. And I think, it may not end up being a job, but it would certainly end up being a good recommendation. And that's how I've tried to approach jobs in the past, and I think in law school it also works in that context. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. It's always important to make sure that you're leaving the best impression that you have, because you never know where that next job's going to come from. So speaking of jobs, Ying Ying and Shauna wrote a chapter about career fairs and interview skills. And so the article looked at the 2L job search. What advice would you have for 1L looking for their first job?
I think for me, the most important advice I received about searching for the 1L job is during the first semester, around the final exam period, do not start to apply for the application for the summer job, because for most of the firms, they do not look at your application until the grade of your first semester come out. And also because your first grade, the first semester grade is so important it's critical for your 1L job application. It's also is very important for when you're looking for your second year summer job. Because when I was debating whether I should apply, right after December 1st, or should I concentrate on my final exam, my mentor, Gina Shishima, she's a hiring partner at Fulbright, and she told me, just focus on your final exam. Do not, spend any time. Start to apply for the 1L summer job. And I realized that that's a very, very valuable advice, and then that saves me a lot of, time, and also I was able to concentrate only on my final exam to make sure I get, the best grade I could achieve. And of course, you don't want to wait too long to apply for the 1L summer job. That's why when I finished my final exams, I just dive in immediately to prepare my resume, my cover letter, and start to make appointment with the career service people so that they can take a look at my resume, give me recommendations on how to improve them. And also, I feel because, people like to take a break and go on vacation during the winter, because you can apply for most of the jobs through the, by email to the law firm. So I was basically on my way with my kids to Disney World, but I was doing, my application in the hotel at night. So I think that should definitely work as long as you can manage how to, prioritize your life and your work, job search. And also, I would like to let the 1L students know that the 1L summer job is not only limited to a summer associate in the law firm, because there are really very, very limited opportunities in the law firm. So there are many other great experience you can obtain through your 1L summer. For example, I did my judicial internship with the federal district judge. I feel that's the tremendous learning experience for me. And also realize unless I'm going to do a clerk, I would never get this opportunity to work in the chamber to, learn what how the judge makes a decision, and to observe the judicial proceedings, and also to learn to do more legal research and how to draft, certain opinions. I just feel this is a wonderful opportunity, and also, there are some like public interest, other or volunteer opportunity you can look for. So don't just focus on one else, in a law firm. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so it looks like we lost Rochelle. That's all right. We're going to wrap up with kind of one final question, since all of you either will be graduating very shortly or have already graduated. Congratulations on that, by the way. Our last question tonight is, after 3 years of law school and spending this past year being mentored by a seasoned legal professional through the Ms. JD Fellowship Program, as you leave law school and embark on your legal career, how do you plan on giving back? We can just kind of go down the line and start with Anisha, if you're willing to jump in.
Sure. How do I plan on giving back? I am going to be working as a public defender in the Bronx after I take the bar. And so, both my career goals as well as sort of a lot of what I did in law school was sort of thinking about, how to use sort of the considerable access and privilege I now have with a law degree to, to sort of amplify voices that aren't really privileged in these spaces. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about academic support programs for people in law school, and then, outside of the law school context, I'm going to be working on representing people who can't afford an attorney in the criminal process. So that's going to be very all-consuming in my way for now.
Awesome. All right. Brenda, what about you?
Hi. So I've already started doing something I really enjoy, and that's mentoring. I really enjoy mentoring young people, and that included young people that are probably starting going through the process of either applying for law school or you know, a 1L or a 2L. And so in law school, I started a little bit of that in various groups that I was involved with. But I also plan to continue that now as a member of various volunteer bar associations in the DC metro area. But more than that, I think, you know, and I guess, I don't know if it's just me as a first generation law student, I feel that now, having had the chance to go to law school and complete and, you know, hopefully in a few weeks sit for a bar and pass, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And I think in my area, there's a lot of opportunities to help those disadvantaged that, like Anisha says, can't afford a lawyer, but there are certain things that through pro bono programs that I can probably help on a short-term basis.
Irene, what about you?
So one thing that over the years I've become passionate about is public education, and this year I became involved with a youth court program here in Philadelphia, which I think is a really wonderful way for young people, very much often in disadvantaged neighborhoods and parts of the city that are otherwise not exposed to very positive interactions with the legal system, I think is maybe a nice way to put that. But I mean, so people who would otherwise maybe not have a very good chance to see what the legal system can do are creating court systems as a basically an alternative to a zero tolerance policy for discipline in schools. It's a really great thing. It's a great thing for law students and lawyers to be involved in. It definitely exists in Philadelphia, and I would highly recommend to anyone who even just likes being around kids. I don't have a background in education, but I think working with seventh graders and young people is really wonderful, and they keep you pretty humble. They're really quite good at picking up on things that it took us 3 years to learn, like objections. So it's pretty amazing how good they are at this and how little assistance they need from lawyers. But so that's something I'm really passionate about and hope to continue as I become a lawyer.
Awesome. All right, what about you, Rebecca?
So my situation in terms of what I'm doing right now is a little different because I will probably be moving after the bar. But I would say that from my experience, this is not something that you have to start after you become a lawyer. Getting involved and giving back is something that you can definitely start while you're in law school. Like I think Brenda mentioned, many of the various bar associations have lots of different ways that law students can give back and help out and get involved with everything from teaching younger students to giving back in the community to helping out lots of different legal aid assistance, foundations and funds and things like that that need someone to do check-in and things like that. So there's definitely lots of ways to start and get ready to give back once you're done by getting involved while you're in law school. So I would say that would be my tip is I'm going to probably have to start from scratch in terms of what I'm involved in, but I would recommend that you get going when you're in law school so that once you become a lawyer, you know what you want to focus on.
All right.
I feel during my last semester, I've been enrolling in the clinics program. I work with the professor. We represent the potential patients who were put in the state mental hospital. So through that experience, I really feel there's so many people, they either their financial reasons or their because of the disease situation, their family situation. So they really need a lot of help for them to protect their rights and to speak for them. And also because I have a biological background, so I feel like I'm able to associate with them like more deeply I can feel the reason they suffer, or they, you know, because they're in this society, there are lots of biases against people with a mental disease, and I kind of feel that really teaches me a lot in how to use our knowledge, and also it's a great opportunity to practice the skills we learned in law school to help people who really need the legal assistance. I feel, you know, in law school there are so many clinics program, and also again, once we are out of school, for example, the law firm I'm going to work for, we have pro bono program. While I was doing my summer intern, I also get involved in the pro bono project. I think that's a great opportunity to give back to the society. I would also like to participate in more mentor program, because I do feel I benefit a great deal from my mentors and from, you know, the senior law students. I'm very happy to be able to share my experience and to help other people to go through the same path we have just been through. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time tonight out of your busy schedules. I know studying for the bar is big time commitments. We really appreciate you all joining us. With that, we'll wrap it up. It looks like we still have lost Michelle. Nevertheless, if you have questions about law school, or if you're pre-law and have questions, be sure to check out ms-jd.org for more blog post information and for the link to the Fellows ebook, which should also be in the video description. All right, have a great night, everyone.